Sounds great. Thank you for the introduction, Alexander. Yeah, hi everyone. It's my honor to get a chance to talk about our recent publication on This&That, language gesture controlled video generation for robot planning. Just to say a quick words about myself, I'm a pretty new assistant professor at the University of Michigan at the Computer Science and Engineering Department. I actually started my professorship last year, 2023, and so far I'm enjoying that and publishing research like this one. And this work is done with collaboration with many students and another faculty, Nima, in University of Michigan. And the Boyang Wang, the student, was leading the project, and there is another PhD student, then PhD. Now he's graduated recently. Adam Fishman. Used to be a student at the University of Washington. So yeah, that's it. And let's go into details. So this paper introduces a new way of controlling the video generation using another modality. We'd call it gesture on top of the traditional modality language. And we use that video generation for robot planning. So before we dive into our method, let's look back into history to see what other people used to be conducting robot planning before these video generating models. So one of the greatest promise that we've seen in the mid to late 2010s was reinforcement learning. And this reinforcement learning, the strength of that is that you don't need a ground truth action signals to train these models. So you could say this is quite a bit of a self-supervised learning as opposed to a traditional supervised learning. So that was the advantage, that people were just able to design some reward functions and able to train these quite remarkable robot methods that can move around without too much of a human instructions. But the downside of these line of works, reinforcement learning, is that it's extremely sample inefficient. And it is quite well known that it requires numerous trials and errors. And these are not really affordable in the real world. And if you look into this graph on the left, what it shows is that the state-of-the-art method, then state-of-the-art method, uses around 18 million frames, which is equivalent to around, I believe, like 80 hours of training sequence of these, Atari games in order to play human-level games. And if you compare that against human abilities, which can learn these games in a few minutes, this is pretty abysmal. Another downside of these reinforcement learning was that we had to manually design these reward functions, and it's quite difficult and often falls into local minimum. A good example is in this paper that we use reinforcement learning and some reward function design to train this, cheetah to walk around in the simulation, and you can see it learns all these like local minimums, all these roundabouts to just get the rewards, And another downside of these reward designing is that for complex tasks, so real tasks like these, you can see in this bridge data set, it's really hard to design the rewards functions, especially if your input modality is just an visual stream of videos, right? And how do you decide whether this robot made it successful or not successful? Especially if you don't have a 3D oracle, this is an extremely challenging task. On top of that, these reinforcement learning methods often overfitted and doesn't generalize when slightest settings change. So the left one is the reinforcement result of these two players gaming together. And as you change one of the actors in the scene, let's say you change the blue as an actor that's trained on a different seed, then basically it just completely fails. So these methods typically don't generalize over multiple environments or multiple tasks. So what are the alternatives? Recently, behavior cloning method has been getting a lot of attention. It's getting so much attention that it's, some people call it even hypes. The essence of this behavior cloning is that it just focuses on the fact that we know that supervised training works, right? It's been proven over and over time that supervised training works, supervised learning works. And we've seen plenty of evidence of this from the natural language processing community or the computer vision community. One example of that is perhaps the transformer architecture for LLMs. So these methods are just trained to predict the next words, and we know exactly what the next word is, and hence we can get a correct supervision to predict the next word. And by doing so, these NLP models are known to learn some good representation of the text. And similar to that, in computer vision domain, we're able to successfully use supervised learning for generalized image synthesis task. A core example would be a diffusion model. So the task of diffusion model involves adding noise to an image and try to recover the original image. And this task is obviously a supervised task because you have a solid target, which is the clean image to train on. And using this supervised learning, these NLP and computer vision has seen so much progress recently. Okay, so the supervised training for robots or robotics these days is what people call it behavior cloning, which essentially requires people doing demos in diverse environments with usually with teleoperations of these robots. And by doing so, they're gathering data, action ground truth data that's associated with the current observations that are typically visual streams of data. So essentially, these researchers are gathering these pairs of data between the visuals and the language prompt, as well as these ground truth action data in order to train a supervised learning models for behavior cloning tasks. And as you can probably know, these are extremely challenging tasks because you have to we have to gather many of these demonstrations, which is very, very expensive. And there has been other successful methods that builds on top of these behavior cloning methods, such as diffusion policies and action chunking transformers, which works quite well for specific tasks, like these ones and these ones. So these videos demonstrate that this method works really well. But the downside is that these behavior cloning tasks are usually limited to single tasks. So when you are given a new environment with a slightest change environment, so for example, you change the shape of these object, or you change the elasticity of these rubbers and so on, then these behavior cloning methods often fails miserably. They do have problem with generalizations. Okay, and in order to scale up this behavior cloning and to enable it to adapt to a new environment and generalize across scenes, people these days are working on robot foundation models, similar to LLMs. So the essence of these robot foundation models is that they try to train on internet scale data, and oftentimes the architecture of these models are large language models, like ChatGPT, like GPT types of models, and they train on various types of VQA, the visual question answering tasks. So they could ask, they show an image and say, what is happening in this image? They say, there's specific answers to it, and they use these answers to supervise these models, and they smartly put in some of these robot tasks into it. So they would say, what should be the action code after this image, things like that to achieve a certain task. And these researchers prepare specific answers, ground truth for these questions, and they use them for supervising these robot foundation models. And it has been proven to show some sign of potential generalization capabilities. However, in practice, even with such a enormous training data that these methods claim to use, the generalization across scenes is still a very difficult task. And the core of the problem is that these models just cannot adapt to the environment. So to show this, we did a pretty quick experiment with the help of Professor Nima and his students. So we basically tried to plug in a recent robot foundation model called OpenVLA. And then we just took the model and then try to use it in our environment. And note that the action codes are fine because they use the same robot, the KUKA, the Panda robot, which we had in our lab. So if you can see this result, you can see that if you do it in 0 shot, it just completely fails, just because the environment changes. Now the table changes, and I don't know what else changes, but it just completely fails in 0 shot, even if this specific robot is in the training data set of these robot foundation models. And once you train this network a little bit more, it's called fine-tuning, using 50 demonstration, it shows some sign of life, that it tries to pick up the red mug as user intended. But it's not only really slow, but even then, it doesn't successfully pick up that red mug. Okay, so we've seen previous methods, reinforcement learning, behavior cloning, and a scale-up version of that called robot foundation models. We've seen that these prior works are great in their own merits. They're amazing works, but they often have challenge generalizing their models to new environment. So it seems pretty obvious to me that we need to come up with a new method for robot learning that can generalize across scenes. So that is a lead to the use of visual generative models for rescue. Because these video and image and video generative models have been really, really successful recently in generalizing across so many different scenarios. So these models are able to generate a wide range of images, for example, a Stable Diffusion 3 model, with some wild types of language prompts. So you can see like it's a so wide range, right? And you can even, the controllability of these models in terms of generating these images is pretty amazing. You can see that you can even try to write text so that this text appears in this image. So judging from the fact that these visual generative models are so generalizable, the natural progression of thought is that can we perhaps use this for generalizable robot planning? Okay, and similar to image generative models, video generative models also work in general types. So these video generative models, surprisingly, they generalize across viewpoints and environments, and whatever compositionality exists in the scene, it typically works really well, and it oftentimes aligns really well to the user input and user alignment, user's intentions. Okay, so we have this image or video generative models on our hand that can very well generalize across viewpoints and environments, and etc. for other features. And also, these models have ability to understand some complex language prompts. And the natural thought would be, how can we use these video diffusion models for planning purposes? The quick answer to that is if you can generate these type plannings in videos, given text prompts, you could immediately see that this will be very useful, right? Because it interprets the language for you, and it visually manifests how these actions can be played out in the 2D space. If you look into this application in a slightly different perspective, this is also interesting. So if you think about what are the data sources exist for robot planning, I can count 3. So first is online videos, right? So robots can learn by watching videos in the wild. So for example, there's a lot of videos on the YouTube that shows you how to iron a cloth, for example, and there's Ego 4D and other data sets that is a really large scale visual real data. But the downside is that there exists a large gap between the hands and the robot arms, and there are no ground truth actions provided. And secondly, the real robot teleoperation data is gaining popularity. For example, there are data sets like OpenX embodiment or Aloha, things like that. And these are excellent for supervised training because we have ground truth action sequences. But the downside of that, they often are significantly difficult to scale up and just limited in quantity. And in terms of simulation data, there's also a lot of them. The good thing is that they can do it with low cost and scale it up. The downside is that there's sim to real gap and generating assets are difficult. So all these methods exist. And I see one way of combining all of them is a video generative model, because whatever data source you use, in the wild video, teleoperation simulations, you're able to gather a lot of video generative models, video data. And within this video data, there exist, physical rules and functionalities and human intentions. All these are embedded and abstracted in the video data set. So I see video generative models for role planning is one way of unifying all these sources of data and then abstracting into one single model of all the priors learned from these data sets. Okay, so our plan is to leverage all these data to learn the internet scale knowledge of physics, functionality, and human interaction, etc., and use that for generalized robot planning. I want to note here that we're not the first group to try this idea. So in fact, there has been a few other groups that try to use video generative models for robot planning prior to us. And some of the examples include this work that use, it's called AVDC. I'm going to talk about it later. And some of the other works that intimately combines the LLMs for chopping down a complex task into small tasks and use video diffusion models as a guide to give you actions. The commonality between all these existing methods using video generative models is that all of them are language conditioned, and they primarily rely on language in generating the next frames to control the video generative models. However, we find that these existing video diffusion models, or VDMs, for robot tasks have really hard time interpreting the complex language into correct videos. And this is especially true when the language and language commands include some spatial reasoning and spatial relations. So an example of that is shown in the left. See that we want the video generative models to fold the cloth from the bottom to top. And this is an existing state-of-the-art open source model for doing this. And you can see that this model not only fails to fold it, but it also gets the direction wrong. So, we told it to fold it from bottom to top, but it does it from the right to left. And here is another example. So we wanted the video generative model to take the blue rectangle box and put it on the top left corner of the table, but it does it on the bottom right of the table, which is exactly the opposite. And you can see that we tried it over and over again, and the trend we see is that these video generative models with language conditionings are just not very capable of correctly interpreting this complex language, especially when there's a spatial reasonings involved. And this is not very surprising because there has been a few recent publications that studies these vision language models' ability to reason in spatial manners. So here's a good example. So it's a paper from Wang et al. So it gives you a map, a image of a map that shows, Wales, pub, hot springs, blah, blah, blah. And it asks these language models some questions, right? In which direction is the whales watches relative to dragonfly drones, blah, blah, blah. And there are correct answers, right? Because it's just spatial relations. But these existing language models, most of these existing VLM models almost completely fails. It just does barely better than the random guesses. So judging from the fact, we can conclude that even though there has been a lot of progress made in vision language models, they still suffer from some tasks, such as understanding complex language commands. Okay, so we showed the proof that the existing video generative models cannot be just plugged and play to conduct these robot tasks. So that's what exactly we showed. So some of the tasks, such as opening the door of the this microwave, the existing methods such as drag anything, even if we provide these dragging points, it couldn't achieve that. And there are various other. I think there's some.
JJ, with the dragging task, could you add some color to that and just kind of really describe how that would work and why it didn't, or not why it didn't, but in the manner in which it didn't work on drag anything?
Yeah, that's a great point. So just drag anything, it tracks a point and says, okay, if I drag this particular point to another location in 2D, it generates a video that respects that. But we see that for these type of scenes that it probably have not seen in this training data for drag anything, that it fails to do so. And I think there's some bug in the PowerPoint right now. But this is another image that shows other existing works. This is streaming to T2V and SVD, and I wonder if it's easy to understand for you, but the essence is that these methods fails to generate plausible plans for robots off the shelf. And if you compare to the ground truth, like none of these methods succeeds in opening the door.
Understood. All right, thank you.
Thanks for asking. Okay, so there is a need for fine-tuning these methods, as well as providing. So there are two problems that we identified. The first is that there's a problem with the language interpretation of these models. The second is that these models don't work well out of the box. So to solve the first problem, we introduce a new modality for conditioning these video division model that we call the language gesture conditioning. So basically, we propose language gesture conditioning, which is to simulate how people will point to the scene and says, okay, I want that can to be moved. And we want to simulate that in robots, but instead of developing methods that can handle pointing in 3D, we instead try to just show the proof of concept, which is the adding point into these language gesture conditioning. So essentially what we do is that in addition to the language prompt, we just click some points in the scene and says, for example, move this to there. And we believe that this, so you might ask, okay, this is a lot of work because clicking requires work, and I would just rather type these complex instructions to the robot. And we would argue that this could be even simpler in terms of human effort in the user standpoint, because we verified that you can actually use more simplified types of instructions if you combine this instruction with gesture clicks. So an example here, we will say, move this to there, or vice versa. Then we can condition that to the video generative model that will generate a proper video corresponding to this language gesture condition.
And a quick question on that again, JJ. Do those different points that you click in there, do they have separate identities somehow as perceived by your model, or are they just two points, and then like kind of the model takes those 2 points, doesn't know what to do with them, but if you say move this to there, how does it know which points to this and which points to there, actually? What I'm saying.
Actually, we do provide the ordering. So the
Thank you.
yeah, there are ordering of these clicks. Yeah, thanks for asking. But in general, the interpretation is quite flexible. So the gist is that we fine-tuned a stable diffusion video model, which is one of the state-of-the-art methods in open source video diffusion model, and we fine-tuned this model on a 14,000 videos on the bridge dataset. And one thing to note is that we provide these click locations automatically during training, which is a process that I'm going to explain in the next slide. So as you can see in these images, we try to gather the click locations automatically. And we do it in the two-step process. So we look into the robot metadata provided by the dataset, and we look into the open or closed end effector signals. And once we grab the signals for that particular frame that has this open or closed signals, what we do is we use a just state-of-the-art detectors, so YOLO V8, to detect the gripper locations, like these two, and we just average it to say, okay, this is the click locations. And then after that, we dilute the 2D locations with Gaussian kernel, like this ones. So for each image, we just provide a 2 click locations, obtained via this automatic process, and this becomes the gesture part of the conditioning. And but the language part of the conditioning, to make these language instructions to be simpler, say instead of describing all these with difficult words, we can simplify it into move this to there, and we use a state-of-the-art LLM like ChatGPT to do that. I mean, in fact, we use Llama. Okay, so let's look at the architecture briefly. So there is this backbone model, this is the architecture of stable diffusion model. We took this model we just downloaded it from SVD. And then we fine-tuned first this model on our dataset, our robot dataset, because we showed that the SV model off the shelf cannot really handle robot dataset because they haven't seen it very much. So once you tune this model, we attach the text instruction model, simple instruction models, and fine-tuning again. And then finally, we bring in these gesture and the first frame models, the gesture obtained using the method that I explained prior to that. And then we use this control that type of architecture to control the decoder. And then this is the final stage of the fine-tuning. So after this a few steps of fine-tuning using a language gesture conditioning, we're able to get a method that can generate really plausible, high-quality videos. These are some of the videos, for examples. So these are all synthetic videos generated by our model. You can see the flexibility of this model, like our method can fold it in any directions you want, or move the objects in any locations. So it's really generalizable method that could handle a wide variety of environments and object setups. Okay, so in terms of video quality comparisons, our method is the state-of-the-art method compared to a few zero-shot method that weren't fine-tuned on this specific data set, as well as another state-of-the-art video-based robot planning method that is trained on this particular bridge data set. And even compared to ABDC, you can see that our method performs better in terms of the video quality. So here's some examples of the qualitative demo to show you exactly what I mean by the controllable video generation. So let's say I want to say, put this banana into there. And as I said before, there's an ordering of these clicks. And we use a video diffusion model to simulate this, which our video generative model successfully follows. And given the same scene, the same image, we can do all sort of stuff. So we can even command it to close this and just click on the handle of this bar. And our VDM successfully generates a plan to do so. Here's another example, still the same scene. You say, put this inside that. And now instead of the banana, this VDM imagines how to put that red object into that cabinet. And finally, if you say, put this near there, just an empty location on the desk, then our video model successfully imagines how this could be done. Okay, so this shows, I hope this shows some flexibility and the power of our video generative models in providing a plan for robots. And in the next slide, I'm going to show some comparison against the previous state-of-the-art, which is ABDC. And you can see that for ABDC, because it's a language-only method conditioning, so we provide a full text provided by the dataset. On the other hand, we provide a simplified text, hence the name This and That of the paper, to our generative model, as well as the click locations. And you can see that our method can achieve this task successfully, so put the ball to the cup, whereas these ABDCs just fails to understand the ball and the cup. And here's another example. So in this case, we want to put this on there, and we provide a correct text that humans would be unable to understand what's going on, just to put the yellow cube on top of the blue cube. But ABDC, simply is unable to understand that due to its lack of capability to understand complex language. And here's another example. So we asked it to put the carrot onto the pen, and ABDC fails, and ours succeed. And here's an interesting example. So we asked it to fold the cloth from the bottom to top, as I showed before, which ABDC fails to understand the spatial reasoning, whereas our method successfully handles this complex spatial reasoning case. Okay, so judging from these results, we ran a user alignment survey to ask the user whether the generated video plans follows the user alignment provided to the users. So basically what we did is that we let the users know of the intentions what we're trying to do. So for example, we want to fold the cloth from bottom to top, and we let them know our intention. And then next we show the videos of each individual method and ask the user to gauge whether this video follows the user intention. And as the result shows, our method, our full method, which contains both the language and gesture control, performs much better than other methods, including the state-of-the-art method, ABDC, which is not very good, actually, in terms of the user alignment. And you can also observe that our full method performs better than providing either the language or gesture. And you might argue that maybe the gesture is enough, like just 2 clicks, and that is enough to constrain the space of possible tasks. But we argue that this is not the case, and an example that we can show is the following. So we click these 2 points, and we didn't say anything to the gesture-only model, and the gesture model inherently confuses whether to pick up the tomato or pick up the cloth. So what it does is that it ends up picking up the tomato and put it in a different place. Whereas if you provide even a simple language, such as follow this to there, then this language gesture video generative model is able to successfully generate a even more higher quality videos that aligns better with user intentions. And this is one example that shows that our method is able to generate a multimodal action distribution, because obviously there are more than one plausible trajectories to achieve a certain task. And video generative model is inherently suitable for generating this variety of possible scenarios. As you can see here, the robot grip that are located at a different direction in the middle of the trajectory. And hence we can show that these video diffusion models naturally generate multimodal action plans. Okay, so this was my explanation about our video generative models. And the next step is about how to convert these generated video plans into robot action. And I already mentioned that there are existing prior works that use video generative model for robots. And some of the common options for doing this is using inverse kinematics, so this is more traditional ways, or training a model that does this inverse dynamics, which means that these inverse dynamic models takes a couple frames in generated videos, and then it translates these frames into actions. So both of these methods, there is a bit of a problem, which is the fact that these methods are closed loop, meaning that it doesn't incorporate the new live data that gets streamed in to the robot as it executes the actions. So once you generate the videos for these common options, the actions are determined, regardless of the live stream video that you observe with the robot. And solution to that,
there, if that's okay, JJ. Sorry to interrupt. But one, so the inverse kinematics, this is going to be based on obviously some perception system being able to give you the pose of the end effector, right?
I would assume so. Yes. So I believe that some of the methods they discretize the action space. And then given the videos, they just conduct the inverse kinematics to optimize their arms into the correct locations. And I believe that the downside of that is that once you have a divergence between your live stream and the video planning, then these inverse kinematics methods could fail because they are physically based. But I agree that they could be not necessarily a closed loop. But for the case of inverse dynamics, it is closed loop.
Right. Yeah, because that was going to be the other question, which is, the closed. I mean, are these closed loop because you only want to generate a video once? Because I suppose halfway through the activity you could always regenerate, right?
That's a great question.
It would be quite costly, I suppose.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, as you mentioned, it's quite costly, and there are some methods that generate some cheap predictions of the future, such as just generating a single image, which I'm going to talk about later. We also compare against these methods. But that's a great point.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. And one thing to note that we showed this converting video plans into robot action in simulation because we did not have the specific robot arm in our facilities. which is, I believe it was the Widow X that was using bridge data set, but these Widow X robot arms are rather rare, and we didn't have it. So hence we showed our experiments in the simulation environment. Okay, so our main idea in converting these videos into robot action is to modify an existing state-of-the-art behavior cloning method, specifically action chunking transformers. And we modify in the sense that ACT can reference a generated videos and convert it into actions. So the image that you're seeing right now is a diagram of the architecture of these action chunking transformers. So it's very simple. These transformer encoder and decoder are just the vanilla transformer architecture. And what it does is that it provides the abstracted feature of a live observation, and it provides as an input token to this transformer encoder, as well as the current pose of the end effector. And it generates the encoder, and then there is a decoder that cross-attends to these encoded tokens to finally output the action outputs. And we made some significant modification to this architecture in such a way that this model can use the video plans. So what we do is that we first process these generated video frames into a very small number of very small dimensional features. Each image is it's only divided into a 512 images, 512 features, and we use it. We do it by with the help of a token learner. And given these 16 tokens that summarizes the video plans almost completely, we use a transformer encoder to cross-attend to these small number of tokens. And similar to the ACT, we put the inputs of the live observations to the encoder. And during the encoder, there is a cross-attention to the videos. And the transformer decoder part is very similar to the ACT, which is cross-attend to the output of the transformer encoder. So the reason why we chose this architecture is it makes this video referencing very flexible. We don't really care about the timestamps. We don't really care about where your current action is, but we just provide these entire video plan we just generated as a chunk. And then we hope this transformer encoder model is able to learn which part of the plan you're currently at, and which of the part of the plan you need to attend to in order to make the next move. So we made it pretty flexible for these transformer architectures to freely attend to the location of the videos that it requires. So that was the explanations of our new architecture that we call it DIVA, Diffusion Video to Action, which is a new behavior cloning model that references the future predicted videos. So let's see some of the demos of the comparisons. So on the left side is the ground truth video doing the task provided as this text prompt. And the middle column is our baseline model that utilizes the language only to generate the video. And the right side is our full model. And note that these videos that I'm going to show are not a generated video. They are actually synthetic rollout that is conducted in the simulation environment. So you can see that this language-based video generative model, and condition on that, we've done this rollout, fails to understand this complex reasoning of the spatial relationships. So it says move sign cylinder to the right of left gray cube, which is actually pretty complex text to understand. And we show that the existing language-based video generative models cannot handle these complex tasks. This is another case. Stack the right green cube on top of the left green cube It almost did it, interpreted correctly, but it reversed the order.
This is very cool, JJ. And please forgive me, but I think I've confused myself. But you said that these had to be done in simulation for a particular reason. But the videos that you showed before were done in situ, they looked like. So what was the setup that you were using there and what precluded you from using that here?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we had to retrain our video diffusion model on this simulation data. So we collected videos here and then we retrained it. The reason why we did it is that for the real data set, the video contains a specific robot arm. So the bridge data set, it has a specific robot arm. It's called Widow X that we didn't have. And it's actually not very common. So because we didn't have it, we couldn't demonstrate this in real life because our robots have different, there's an appearance gap between different types of robot arms, and there's also a gap between the action space. So we were just not able to, use this pre-trained model in the bridge data set and apply in Panda, for example.
Okay, now I feel a bit silly, and hopefully this clarification helps others who maybe made the same mistakes I did. But previously you were just showing the video generation, you weren't actually showing the rollout. And actually it looked so good to me that I thought it was the rollout.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So everything that we showed sorry. Yeah, I should have clarified that. Yeah, so everything that you've seen in the real scene is just a video generative model. Yeah, thank you for the clarifications. Okay, so the next slide we have is a slightly more challenging task. So in this case, there are just the same objects, 4 objects in the scene, exactly same objects, and our language prompt is also quite difficult. It says move leftmost cyan cylinder behind the second rightmost cyan cylinder, which the language only video generative model fails, so the rollout also fails, and same for this case as well. These stacked in at different locations. Okay, so some of the quantitative results. So you can see that, so we try to measure the success rate of these robotic rollout in the simulation environment. And you can see that the state-of-the-art methods such as, AVDC retrain, we retrained it on this specific data set and it didn't perform as well as ours. As well as these another state-of-the-art method called Suzy, which I'm going to talk about, which is relevant to what Alexander you were talking about, that you replan these with the visual generative model as you go into the robot actions. One thing to note that these existing behavior cloning models, such as the action chunking transformer, using vision only, vision language only, and the vision language and gesture. So even if you provide all these labels to the action chunking transformer, the behavior cloning model, these methods are not performing so well. So it's very interesting to see that this shows the power of doing the plan in the visual space as opposed to relying on the transformer architecture and the internally doing the planning within the token space is fares worse than planning in the visual space. Okay, so we specifically wanted to show the comparison against the Suzy because it's a powerful baseline that does the regeneration of the videos as it goes. So what it does is that instead of generating video, it generates images. So given this first frame, it first generates the next keyframe, and then it executes it and generates again, and it executes it. And this seems a pretty cool method, but and it is actually a really powerful baseline, but it suffers from the same disadvantage that's shared by other video generative methods. which is the fact that it also relies on language to make this planning in the image space. So similar to language video models, these language image generative models also lack spatial reasoning. So here you see the visual planning of Suzy. So this is, we just stacked up all these the image plans generated into Suzy as the task goes, and we just made it into a video, but it's actually a sequence of images that are generated along the way. And this is the rollout result that executes these visual plans. And you can see that the prompt says, move the right red cylinder to the left of the cyan lev. And you can see that it fails to do so because it picks up the left one as opposed to the right one. And you can see that our method does it correctly. And this tells you the fact that even though Suzy is arguably a smarter method than the closed loop method that does the inverse dynamics, it still suffers from the fact that its language module is unable to understand the spatial reasoning correctly. Okay, and another reason why Suzy doesn't fare well is because our video plans provides more rich signals of how to do a detailed manipulations. So here's some ablation study we did. So when we provide only a single goal frame to our behavior cloning model. So I think there is some bug in the visualization. There's actually a single frame here that performs much worse than the other number of goals. So if you provide the entire sequence of video that's generated and make the transformer architecture reference these videos, it performs the best. Whereas if you only provide the final goal, it doesn't perform so well. And this tells you that this visual generative model not only plays the role of planning, but also provides an information about a detailed manipulation sequences. And hence, with the lack of these in-between frames provided by Suzy, we also observed that oftentimes even the planning is correct, the execution fails. And this is shown by our ablation studies. And the next ablation study we did is that instead of providing all the frames, we try to selectively sample subsamples of these frames. So let's say if you were to sample 15 frames, and let's say if you randomly sample these 15 frames within the generated 25 frames, it actually performs better because it becomes less overfitted to the specific time frames that are associated with each of the frames. So yeah, so adding some temporal noise in selecting the frames seemed very helpful. So in conclusion, we show that the state-of-the-art video diffusion models can be fine-tuned into a generalizable planner. And we also show that the use of gesture significantly alleviates the downside of the language-only video diffusion model in the sense that it overcomes the lack of spatial reasoning of the language-only video diffusion models. And the fact that we're utilizing the internet scale data in training these video diffusion models, as well as fine-tuning this, it opens up the door for a new framework of robot planning, which is to use any type of robot demos and any internet-scaled videos out there as a training module for robot planning. We also showed some elegant incorporation strategy of modifying a existing behavior cloning method to reference the generated video frames to execute the robot actions. Some of the future work they were interested in is trying real robot demos with this system. And we're seeing some sign of hope because we've been observing that there are more and more teleoperation demo data set that uses a variety of robots, including Panda, which is more common than Widow X. So we're hoping that we can utilize this data set to train our video diffusion model and train our transformer architectures and apply it into a same robot that has the same action space. And another interesting direction is to replace the clicking with pointing of fingers as we originally intended. So this will be really interesting because oftentimes at home, what we do is when we or at home in office, when we ask other people and to deliver your intention to certain actions, you would say, okay, give me that cup, or please close that door, things like that. And this is a very natural way of communicating spatial reasoning to other people. And I believe that these type of spatial reasoning is also efficient for human-robot interactions as well. Another avenue of improvement is using more powerful video models, especially these days. There are new models coming out almost every month that are more powerful than the previous ones. And we'd like to extend our work for more challenging manipulation tasks, such as manipulating cables and doing some sewing, as opposed to primarily pick and place challenges. Also, we would like to extend our work for dealing with more complex tasks that requires multiple steps as opposed to a single atomic process, such as the task of cooking, which involves multiple processes. Okay, that was it, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, JJ. I really appreciate that. Now, I know we're up on time now, but would you be able to hang out for another 10, 15 minutes for some questions?
Oh, yeah, that would be great.
Excellent. So I'm just gonna, so what we'll do is have the questions in the chat, and I'll just pick questions according to uniqueness of the question, how relevant it is to the talk. I'll try to prioritize people who haven't asked the question yet. And I've just written in the chat there, put an asterisk in front of your question if you want to unmute. Otherwise, I'm going to read it out or paraphrase it myself for you. But it's generally better if you can unmute, just to increase the engagement and make sure other people are really participating. So Ram asks if you have any plans for this running in autonomous mode, if you thought this could run autonomously, because you need a user to interact with it to have it work. So is there like some sort of modality in which you can have this autonomously running, like maybe with just initial prompts?
I see. That is a great question. So right now, we assume that user provides both the language and gestures. And hopefully, if we can provide a separate module that can generate the gestures, that would be really nice. And we do not see the advantage of doing that as of now, but perhaps separating the task into generating gestures versus generating the videos and executing from the video might be helpful than just having a one giant model, such as these OpenVLA models that does everything internally. So yeah, I think that's a very interesting way. So perhaps we can generate these gestures as well in the middle of the process.
All right, thank you. I've got an easy one for you to knock out of the park. What software is used for simulation?
We use ISAAC.
Okay, great, excellent. Sammy asks, what do you think the limitations of current planning methods are for more complex tasks like cooking?
Yeah, we're very far from it, in the sense that first of all, we don't have much data, right? We don't have much data, teleop. I do believe that there could be enough data for just in the wild data for humans doing it, but there is a gap between the human arms and robot arms. That is one concern, and another concern is manipulation is so difficult. Like right now, what we've been showing is mostly pick and place and push and pull, but cooking involves much more difficult manipulation tasks, such as cutting vegetables and mincing meat. All that stuff is it's just above and beyond the simple pick and place task that we're focusing on. So manipulation is certainly a challenge. The third challenge would be complex planning. So you obviously need to come up with a recipe if you want to cook, and divide it and conquer. You need to be able to divide a subtask into another subtask, which I believe that might be the closest the thing that is being solved, because we have LLMs that are so powerful. So perhaps these LLM models are able to generate the subtask prompts and gestures, and that could be used for generating these videos that corresponds to a single atomic task.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to segue off something you said there, which is like, human videos are different from robot videos. Like obviously a robot arm looks different to a human arm. So, I mean, I don't suppose you give much thought to perhaps leveraging the existing YouTube videos on cooking instructionals, for instance, to plan for humanoid robots, because now they have the same kind of morphology and as human hands, and maybe you can just apply a style transfer to get from a skin and flesh to a robot arm.
Yeah, that would be really great. I mean, even if the manipulation itself might not be readily transferred into robots, the high level planning itself could be still used. So I see a lot of potential there. And as you mentioned, we could do some sim to real style transfer that I know that a lot of people have been working on it. I don't know the recent progress there, but that seems to be a promising direction. And yeah, so another thing that I want to note is that in this project, we are basically showing that these videos do have meaning, like these human videos, because this stable video diffusion model that we are based off on is already trained on an online data set that mostly contains humans, and not much, I assume, it doesn't contain much of the robot data as its training data. And all of these methods that we showed today wouldn't have been possible without the pre-trained models. Without the pre-trained weight, it just wouldn't be possible to train off of this small size data set. So we are implicitly leveraging these existing YouTube videos that doesn't have any robot in it.
Okay, thank you. And I'm waiting for more questions, so I'll continue to segue on this, because so I would like to know how difficult it was to fine tune the diffusion models for video generation from their domain to this robot domain. I mean, was it hard, or did you just try and the first time it worked out really well and it made these videos that we saw on these slides?
Oh, it was really hard.
What were some of the challenges, and how did you overcome them?
So if you just train it without too much conditions, it just doesn't give you the quality that you want. And if you look into existing open source methods, such as this AVDC, the quality is so low. And the reason we believe is that it just, I mean, there are some architectures that we played on. We did a lot of search in the architectures like ControlNet, and even within ControlNet, like we did something different from ControlNet in the sense that we not only use the conditioning in terms of the ControlNet, the skip connection, we also use the concatenation of these inputs to the input of the diffusion model. So some of these small tricks does help, but I believe that the most important thing is reducing your distribution, meaning that as you give more conditions, then the the more clear it becomes for the diffusion models to generate the videos. So let's say if you just provide the language versus if you provide the language and gestures, providing gestures not only give you more controllability, but it also gives you a better quality. Well, just because your diffusion model is just knows what to expect from gestures. So, realizing this fact took us a lot of time. So we tried, these just language-based generation, and we were just wondering why the quality is not there. As soon as we process the data so that we can provide the gestures, automatically, things like that, and we immediately saw a boost of performance and quality, and also the user alignment. So those are the key factors.
Okay, thank you. Sammy's got another question. Actually, this was on the back of his first question. Where do you think? Have you given much thought to neurosymbolic methods and how they fit into the landscape that you're dealing with here?
I'm not really familiar with neurosymbolic method.
Okay. Yeah. Neither am I actually. Sammy, if you were to unmute and give like additional guidance for that question, I wouldn't mind. But for now, we'll just move on. So again, another one from me, because I want to understand a little bit. So it looks like you were labeling like move this to that. I'm just wondering, like, first of all, was there more diversity to the types of gestures and labels, not just like taking something from one place and moving it to another potentially? And so that's one part of my question. And another part, because it might be related, is did you leverage pre-labeled data sets? Like, for example, put the ball in the cup. Did you just change that to move this to there? Or did you actually make use of ball and cup, and like, you could have used like YOLO to detect the ball in the cup, for instance, rather than just use this method of like, when the gripper closes, that's the this, and when the gripper opens, that's the there. So anyway, sorry, to wrap up the question is like, how diverse did you get with the labeling? What did you use to, how did you make use of the existing labeling?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you look at this video, it's actually quite diverse, I would say. I mean, is mostly pick and place, but there's opening up the microwave. There's, this is pick and place.
So for instance, with opening the microwave, how would that have been labeled? Would it still have been move this to there, and the this is like pointing at the handle, and the there is down at the bottom of the screen?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we do is that we detect the closing of the grip, and then we says just click it there, and we utilize the existing prompt provided by the data set, which is probably said, okay, open the microwave, and then we just say open this, right, using LLM to convert it into simple prompt. And it does contain mostly pick and place, but there are some things like folding, I think, is slightly more challenging. But it doesn't have anything like, cut the vegetables in the cutting board or sewing, and this is like way difficult task that I think requires further research.
Okay, understood. Thank you. Okay, well, if there's no more questions, I think we're going to close it out there. Again, thank you very much, JJ, for your time. Thanks for providing that kind of motivation and where robotics has taken us so far, or where machine learning robotics has been going so far. I think that was quite useful. So yeah, again, thank you for your time, JJ. It was great, and I enjoyed the discussion afterwards as well.
Thank you so much for inviting. It was really fun for me as well.